Tim was has been president, Betty Murphy has been president, and Becky is our current secretary, and maybe we're all
Okay. 50 or 60 of us write a check, $10 and usually more, because we want to be part of something that's called Friends of the Laurel Library. Our goal is to support the library by advocating for it at the county level, providing materials, equipment, and program not funded in the yearly budget, and to stimulate even greater use of the library. We're hopeful that tonight's program will inspire you and the boys whose lives you touch to walk through our library doors more frequently and more enthusiastically. We want to thank the Mayor and City Council of Laurel for making this space available for us and for waiving the fees. And we want to thank them for donating to the Friends of the Laurel Library each year. Councilman Tom Dernoga does the same, and we really appreciate that. He encourages us to apply for grants that we're able to get. Diane Ashworth, our Laurel Library branch manager, is at a library meeting tonight, so she wasn't able to be here. But Jane Leiden and Andrea Erickson have worked really hard to get this program going, so I'm going to turn it over to them immediately.
Okay, good evening. I'm Jane Leiden. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? Thank you. We'd like to all welcome you here from the Laurel Library, and we are very grateful to the Friends of the Library for making this possible for all of you to come here and hear someone like Michael Sullivan, who is really an expert on boys and their reading habits and what could be better reading habits, actually, for some of them, and what really interests boys in terms of reading. So tonight he's going to give us a little talk about that. And just to give you a little background on him very, very briefly, because we want to let him take the microphone and really talk. He is a library director right now in Weeks, New Hampshire. And in August he will be retiring to do this kind of work full time. He has written a book called Connecting Boys with Books. And he is in the process of writing fiction books now. And a new series will be starting in September that he's writing. And he will tell you more about that. I'm just going to give you a little teaser on that. He has his bachelor's degree from Harvard University, cum laude. He has his MLS from Simmons College in Boston, which is really excellent, excellent school for getting an MLS. And he also teaches there. So I'm not going to really say any more. I'll let him do the talking and give you, what he knows about boys and their reading. Just one little housekeeping point. If you did not sign in, please do sign in. And we also have some really excellent handouts for you. And if you would like to get a book, you can order it from Amazon.com. Okay? So let's please welcome Michael Sullivan.
No way I can stand there and do that. Thank you all for coming out today. It's great to see people interested in a topic that is obviously very near and dear to my heart. Boys and reading is something that has been a part of my life since I first started as an educator some more than 2 decades ago. It seems like such a long time ago now. But I started off my career as a special needs teacher in a special needs boarding school. For any of you who've even considered such a career, this was a tough place to work. All the kids that I dealt with when I first started teaching as way too young to be doing this, were heavily involved and needed tons of help. And that's really the background that I'm coming from. And I will give you little bits of that as we go through the night. But understand I have been working with kids for a couple of decades, and more often than not I deal with kids that have a lot of problems. And I think reading is such an important thing that we can't leave that to chance. We can't allow kids to grow up not being readers. But we'll talk about that some first. First of all, we've got to address this issue that you may have seen now in Time Magazine. You may have seen it in newspaper articles around here. There's this thing called the reading gap. Who here has heard that phrase before? What's the reading gap? That's a wonderful sounding term. Unfortunately, nobody knows exactly what it means. So let me sort of define this thing for you. The question is it that boys don't read as much as girls? They don't read as well as girls? Is it something that's inherent in being a boy? Is it what's going on? Let me give you the numbers that sort of define this for us. And this is all the bad news right up front. After this, it gets a whole lot better. Let me hit you with the bad news right off the bat. You all know that we do an awful lot of education testing in schools now, right? This is the big national movement towards accountability in education. We test our students incessantly. I would think just a little too much, but that's neither here nor there. The good news is all that testing gives us some pretty hard numbers to work with. If you take 30 years of national education testing, in the last 30 years, in every single test, in every single year, at every single age level, girls have always scored higher than boys in reading. No exceptions, no anomalies. For anyone who works with statistics, that's what we call determinant. 30 years of the same result over and over again. Sooner or later, you start to get the message. What does it add up to? If you add up all those scores, divide them out, it comes out to a year and a half. When we talk about the reading gap, that's what we're talking about, a year and a half difference. The average American boy reads a grade and a half behind the average American girl the same age. And we are talking about averages here. I don't want people to get upset at me because I'm going to say some things that are going to make your skin crawl. I guarantee you I'm going to say something at some point today that every one of you is going to flinch. Understand, when I say boys are, girls are, boys do, girls do, I'm talking about averages here. Usually this is a 6-hour seminar. I'm not going to put you folks through 6 hours of this, but that means I don't have time to explain it every time I use that term. I'm talking about tendencies in big groups. I think these are worth talking about. I know all kids are individuals. Remember, I taught at a special needs boarding school. I understand all kids are individuals as well as anybody out there. But that doesn't mean we can't talk meaningfully about big trends where a lot of boys may show this way and a lot of girls may act that way. And this gives us tools to use to fix problems like this reading gap. A year and a half. If that doesn't sound like much to you, consider this. If you had twins and they were in second grade and one of them was reading at second grade reading level and one of them was reading at kindergarten reading level, would that concern you? It would scare the bejesus out of me, right? And actually, a week ago, I actually was doing a talk here, and two separate parents in the audience came up to me afterwards and said, I have twins. And each one, it was a boy and a girl, and each one said, yeah, the boy's a year or two behind the girl in reading. That's the national average. That's what you're used to. But then you think that's why we send them to school, right? Hopefully you send them to school, by the time they get out of school, schools are taking care of that problem, right? Wrong. You'll learn this about me very quickly. If I ever give you a question like that, right? The answer is always no, it's not the case. By the time they reach the 11th grade, the average American boy is reading 3 years behind the average American girl. It gets worse as they go through school. As a matter of fact, we're going to find out a little later why, kids enter school within a year usually of each other on average, boys and girls. But by the time they leave school, that reading gap is 3 years. If you're counting on schools to fix the problem, they're not going to. And the funny thing is, it's not their job. We'll find out later why, but the schools, it's not their job to fix this problem. It's all of our jobs to fix this problem because the schools, unfortunately, are tasked with the job of teaching kids how to read. That's not the answer to the reading gap. The answer to the reading gap is teaching kids why to read. Teaching them that this is a lifelong thing that they can enjoy, that they're going to get enjoyment and fulfillment out of their entire lives, and that has nothing to do with proficiency whatsoever. We need to teach kids to become avid readers. Of course, that's a little hard to do with boys for a couple of reasons. First of all, boys just don't read as much as girls either. There was a study done in England a couple of years back. They followed 15-year-olds around. And I want every one of you to think in your mind right now, what is a reasonable amount of time every week for a 15-year-old to read? 15-year-olds, they're in school, this is their developmental period. How many hours per week should they spend with a book? Just put that number in your head for a second, and let me tell you what the studies show. In England, where, remember, television is the BBC, we're not talking about real competition here, English girls read on average, at age 15, 4.5 hours per week. Is that not the scariest number you've ever heard? 4.5 hours per week. That's less than an hour a day, 5 days a week, assuming they take the weekends off. Is that enough reading for a 15-year-old? Not at that developmental stage. The really bad news, boys read just about half, 2.3 hours per week. That's less than half an hour a day, 5 days a week. Do you think you're going to become a lifelong reader that way? And it just isn't going to work. All right. Then, of course, just 2 years ago, in America, we did this thing called the sophomore study. Someone decided they were going to, if you're going to go out and study 14-year-olds, let's get all of it done at once, right? Let's not go back and keep asking them questions. One study followed American high school sophomores around, 14, 15-year-old kids, and just studied everything that they do, what they ate, how many hours they slept, what they did with their friends, how much they read, all of these things. Of course, what did I do? I flipped to the reading section. The report's about that thick, by the way, if you ever want to read it. It'll put you to sleep pretty fast. But I flipped to the reading section and saw an amazing number. On a per-hour basis, boys in America read 10% less than girls. I thought, that's not bad. I thought maybe, there's about 8 or 9 of us running around the country screaming about this all the time. You probably get sick of hearing us after a while. But I'm thinking, hey, it's starting to work. We're making a difference. Boys only read 10% less than girls in America. And then I read the fine print. You know what the fine print said? Boys read on average 2.3 hours per week, just like in the English study. Girls read 2.6 hours per week in America. Equality is a wonderful thing, right? But not when you go into the lowest common denominator. We don't want equality at that lower level, but that's what we're facing in America today. So probably in a couple of years, you're going to be sitting here listening to someone talk about how to connect girls with reading. That's not my topic today, but that number is still scary. Both studies in England and America back it up. 14 and 15-year-olds read on average, boys read 2.3 hours per week. It's not enough. Why? Why don't they read? Well, there's an attitude problem going on. There's a researcher named Michael Smith who is known in education circles for just asking the right question and getting good answers. He wrote a book called Reading Don't Fix No Chevys, which is just a great title for a book. Go ahead and read it, and you'll see a little bit of his research. But his best research, he asks American high school freshmen on the first day of school when they show up, how much do you read? Just hands them a slip of paper, fill in the blank, no argument, no discussion, just how much do you read? Give me an answer. More than half of the boys in Michael Smith's study say, I don't read. Their answer is 0. Oh, half of the boys say, I don't read. Understand, we know that isn't true, right? There has never been a kid in this world who's ever eaten a bowl of breakfast cereal and not read the box, right? Boys read. They do. But when an adult, an educator, asks a 14-year-old boy in America, how much do you read? His perception of the question, of course, is how much of what I consider reading do you read? And his answer is, I don't read, because I don't read what you want me to read. That's a perception problem we all have to answer. Whether you're a teacher, a librarian, or just a parent, you're not immune from this. You have to deal with that problem. Of course, some of you are sitting back. If you've ever known a 14-year-old boy, you're sitting back there saying, what do you expect him to answer, right? He's a 14-year-old boy. You're asking him a question about education. Wouldn't you be disappointed if he didn't give you a snide answer like that? UCLA does the same study. First day of school, University of California, Los Angeles. Freshmen, the first day they show up, they hand them a test. It's a pretest. It's got a whole bunch of questions. One of those questions is, how much do you read? This is a somewhat select group, right? These are kids that worked hard enough to get into college. They were motivated enough to apply to college. They were responsible enough to show up on the first day of school, and how many of us could say that? This is the crew they're asking, and more than a third of the young men in UCLA's study give the same answer. I don't read. How? How do you give that answer to your college, to the people that are going to control the next 4 years of your life, the people who have said that you are a good enough student to be here, and you say, nah, I don't have to read? Can you imagine saying that to your college? But more than a third of the young men in America give just that answer. I don't read. It's a perception issue. I'm going to start by talking about perception today. I'm going to end by talking about perception today. I'm probably going to mention it 5 or 6 times in between, because it matters. Perception matters. Too many boys in America say, I am not a reader. And if they say that, then they're not going to read. And sadly enough, if they don't read, they'll never become good readers. And if they don't become good readers, they'll never become lifelong readers. We need to fix that. And I think we can. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. And I want to make a little warning right up front. If your son reads well, and he's over the age of 8, if your son's less than 8, you have to listen to me anyways. But if he's over the age of 8 and he reads well, don't listen to a word I say. Don't rock the boat. He's doing fine. I'll talk about, a little later, I'll talk about a dad who just blew me away by not realizing how lucky he really was. But if your boy is having trouble reading, or if your boy is not yet in the 3rd or 4th grade, I get bad news. You've got a problem on your hands, and I think I can help you fix it. My answers are often somewhat extreme. Understand, that's my background. I come from places where kids don't do really well. That's who I work with. But, you know, there's this old definition of insanity, right? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you've got a boy that isn't reading well, you need to shake things up. I can help you do that. Let's start by addressing the problem head on here. And I want all of you to make an admission with me. I want you to say this out loud. Even if you don't believe it, I want you to hear it coming out of your own mouth, because this is where it all starts. All right? So everybody take a deep breath, get ready, and say with me, boys and girls are different. Can everyone say that? Just try it once. Boys and girls are different. I come from an era in education where we would not admit that. We fought that so hard. We thought that the only difference between boys and girls was that some idiot put a pink bonnet on one and a blue bonnet on the other way back in the nursery, and it was downhill ever since. We know that's not true now. We have brain research. On the handouts that I've given you, one of the handouts, the one that starts connecting boys with books, on the back of it is a whole list of wonderful books that you can do your homework with. And if, by the way, your son is resistant to do his homework, say, okay, you do your homework, I'll do mine. Handouts are up here if you'd like them. Don't feel bad about coming up and getting them. I am a librarian by trade. I'm used to story hour. People can wander around. It doesn't bother me one bit. You know, don't worry about it. On that list of books that you can read for homework is a book by Michael Gurian called Boys and Girls Learn Differently. It will change your view of boys and girls very, very quickly. 20 years of brain research, here's what it says. I'm going to give you a few of the highlights. First and foremost, boys' brains develop a little slower than girls' brains do. Girls develop a little quicker. This is no big surprise to anyone who's seen a 2nd grade class picture, right? You can picture it now in your head. What's the back row? All girls, right? Girls just develop faster than boys. That's just something that's the way we work. I'm a fairly tall guy. I'm 6.5 feet tall. I was in 6th grade before I was the tallest kid in my class. Marjorie Joy was always taller than me. So I'm used to this. But that's an outward sign of what's going on inside their heads. Just brains develop at different paces. The average 3-year-old boy has the same language skills as the average 2-year-old girl. By the time they're 3, that difference in brain development has already kicked in. It's not a matter of a better brain or a worse brain. It's just developing at a different pace, and there's nothing wrong with that. You need to continue to tell your boys this if they get freaked out because they're not reading as well. Be understanding and understand they really aren't going to develop quite as fast as girls. It's just natural. And it carries right through the high school years. Do you know when the average girl has a full adult-sized brain? When do their brains reach peak size? At age 11 and a half. Isn't that the scariest thing you ever heard? Does this not explain the last run-in you've had with a 12-year-old girl? Right? What did you say to me? You sound like you're on Oprah or something. I mean, you're just... they may not know how to use all that equipment yet, but they've got the fully functioning adult brain at age 11 and a half. And we don't often recognize and honor that fact, that they really do. And again, that's not my topic today. My topic, do you know when boys get their full adult-sized brain? At age 14 and a half. 3 years later. 3 years. Where have we heard that difference before? By the time they reach the 11th grade, girls are 3 years ahead of boy in language skills. A large part of that explanation is simple brain development. They'll catch up, don't worry. What hurts is how much they fall behind in the process. And by the way, does that not explain the last run-in you've had with a 12-year-old boy? What did you say to me? You know, they haven't got the fully functioning equipment yet. We need to be very understanding, and I'm going to try and get a little humor in as we go today, and it's not random, and it's not that I'm trying to be a comedian. I have no desire to do that. I'm from New Hampshire. I don't have a funny bone in my body. It's because so much of this issue, especially the perception side of it, is tension. And laughter is the great reliever of tension. You know what? Sitting there and yelling at a boy who doesn't read well isn't necessarily the best approach. He knows he doesn't read as well as his classmates. His teacher probably told him that 20 minutes ago. You don't have to keep reminding him of it. A little bit of humor can go a long way, a little bit of understanding. But understand, first and foremost, that that brain difference is there, that girls are just developing a little bit faster than boys. There will be that lag. The other great brain difference, though, and this is something that explains so much, the structure of a boy's brain is different from the structure of a girl's brain. You know about left brain, right brain, right? Everyone knows about creative versus analytical. Half of your brain does one, the other half does the other. As a matter of fact, most people can operate fine on either half of their brain, right? Each hemisphere of your brain can do its job. But how we use that is very different because there's a third part of the brain involved, and that's the part that connects the two. It's sort of the traffic cop of the brain. It's called the corpus callosum. You don't have to know that. Understand, though, that there's a strip in the center of your brain that makes the different parts of your brain work together as opposed to separately. That part of the brain is 10% larger or more in your average girl than it is in your average boy. Which means that if you give a boy a problem, he's going to tend to use one half of his brain to solve it. He's either going to go at it creatively or he's going to go after it analytically. And good luck changing his mind. And by the way, does that not sound like most of the men in your lives, if you're women? Right. This is one of the themes we're going to have today, is that, we're not all that different from when we're 5 to when we're 50. All right? We really do operate in much the same way, and part of that is brain structure, and this is a big thing. Girls will naturally attack a problem holistically, somewhat creatively, somewhat analytically. They'll use their entire brain because the part that connects the two halves of their brain is bigger and stronger and is more dominant. And that's the way their brain works, whereas guys will tend to operate on one half or the other. And, you can go back into, that ancient biology questions about, hunters versus gatherers, and maybe that's where the difference is. I don't care. It just is the way brains are today. Unfortunately, of course, if you want to do upper-level thinking, you need both halves of your brain, and reading is always upper-level thinking. That puts boys at a big disadvantage, right? So we throw up our hands, we go home and say, it's determinate, there's nothing we can do, right? Wrong. Come on. Remember, I'm used to story hour. This is call and response. I don't know you're awake if you don't. We can fix this problem. This is easy, right? And here's the easy answer. If you want to get both halves of a boy's brain working, you just have to add a little energy. It's like kick-starting a motorcycle. You add a little energy, bam! The engine runs fine after that. The energy is stimuli. Add stimuli to a boy's environment, and he is going to operate better on both halves of his brain. It actually just wakes his brain up and gets it motoring. What do I mean by stimuli? See if this doesn't sound like every 12-year-old boy you ever met. Sound, color, motion, and kinetic energy, the body in motion, right? These stimuli are what gets a boy's brain moving and working and operating and allows him to do upper level thinking. And this explains an interaction that I can guarantee most of you, who here has a boy at home? Good chunk of the crowd. See if this doesn't sound familiar to you. You send Junior up to do his homework at night, right? Right after dinner, right? Send him up to do your homework right away. He goes into his room, shuts his door. 5 minutes later, you're at the door. Why? You can hear him, the music, right? The television, someone whispered over here, right? You can hear sound coming out of the room. You open up the door, and what do you see? He's splayed out on the floor. Boys are physical, expansive creatures. They're going to tend to want to expand out, and there he is splayed out on the floor. He's got the book in front of him, sure. And right above the horizon of the book is the television. And you can hear the television over the radio that's going on this side of the room. And Junior is kicking a soccer ball against the wall, right? Or doing what all guys do instinctively, right? Tennis ball, against the wall, on the ground, catch. Bang, bang, catch. Bang, bang, catch. Bang, bang, catch. We can do that for hours, right? It's just naturally tuned into us, right? You go in there and you blow your stack, right? You grab the tennis ball out of his hands. You snap off the television. You snap off the stereo. You pick him up off the floor by the scruff of his neck. You put him in a nice hardback chair, and you tell him, now concentrate. That's what he's trying to do. Does this not explain it? That's what he's trying to do. His brain is falling asleep. He knows he needs stimuli to wake up. He's overcompensating to the nth degree, right? He is going way overboard, the way all of us do when we don't understand what's going on around us. You know what? We can fix this situation. Understand, I can't read without music going on. If I try and read without music or Monday Night Football, which is the greatest time for guys to read, because, you know, football, a 3-hour football game has under 30 minutes of action in it, right? So how many of the guys that you know in your life, if you were a woman, or guys, if you've ever found yourself in this position, you're sitting on the couch watching the football game with a book in front of you, because you got 2.5 extra hours during the football game to kill. I need that. I can't read for more than 15 or 20 minutes if I don't have that added stimuli. Be understanding if the boys in your life need a little of that stimuli too. But you know what? It's not just at home this happens. Teachers in the crowd? How many teachers in the crowd? Why do you look so reluctant all of a sudden? Wow. The parents get their hands up like this. The teachers are like, oh, I know what's coming. Last time you had a little run-in with one of your students. Stop tapping your pencil on your desk. Stop pulling Susie's hair. Stop staring out the window. Put all 4 chair legs on the floor and concentrate. Yep, you got it. That's what he's trying to do. We set up our learning environments, whether it's the homework place at home. If you have a separate homework place, a lot of homes have gone to that, right? You set up a homework place where there are no windows, where there's no disruptions, where you can shut the door, where it's dead silent, there's nothing on the walls. That's the place to do homework, right? It's just the way we set up our educational institutions. Think about the last classroom you were in. What color were the walls? White. What color was the ceiling? White. And sound deadening tiles to boot, right? They're not only white, they're sound deadening tiles. Make sure there's no noise floating around. If there are windows, of course, we close them. And we have those nice pale colored walls and those nice neutral colored floors and our nice sound deadening tiles. Isn't this amazing? When we expect people to sit down and concentrate, we block out all the stimuli. And that's the way classrooms are set up. That's the way too many libraries are set up. That's where homework centers are set up. As a matter of fact, we do everything we can to block stimuli out of a student's environment in order to help them to concentrate, when that's exactly what boys need. Why do we do that? Nature's little joke. Girls don't need the added stimuli. They already have a brain that's structured to work holistically. They don't need the stimuli to get them kick-started. In fact, girls are better at picking up stimuli. They hear better, they see better, they focus faster, they pick up body language and facial expressions better than boys do. If you flood a girl's environment with stimuli, you can't help her. All you can do is distract her. Doesn't this put your teachers in a really tough bind? You've got 30 kids in front of you, and this half of the room here needs stimuli in order to keep their brains awake. They need it just to have they need to have that extra energy in their environment in order to learn. You folks over there, on the other hand, don't need the added stimuli. In fact, added stimuli, all it's going to do is distract you. What a tough spot. Who do we take care of? We take care of those guys. Why? Are we being mean? No. I can honestly say I don't think I've ever met an educator that purposely discriminated against boys. They may be out there, but they don't come to hear me speak. We have nothing to say to each other. And if they come, they don't last very long. No, it's actually for a very good reason that we do this. It's for the best of intentions. Why? Because we want kids to have the perfect learning environment. We want it to be perfect for them. So we set up a learning environment exactly the way we wished people would set it up for us. And we forget that most of us are women. It's a perspective issue again, right? We set up the environment the way we would like it and forget that there might be a different point of view out there. This theme is going to come up over and over and over again, that we sometimes have to put ourselves in the shoes of a 10-year-old boy if we want to help him to read. Understand we're not the target audience. And we have to think a little bit the way they do. What am I asking? Am I asking for you to basically stop taking care of those people and take care of these people? No. But just understand their different learning styles. Leave some space for a little motion. Leave some room in your day for a little bit of noise and a little bit of sound. Open the windows in your classroom if you're a teacher, or if you're expecting, your son to do homework at home. Give him something to refocus on. Give him some activity. You know what schools are experimenting with these days? Stress balls. Just those little squeezy balls. If you can just hand those out in a classroom to kids that won't sit still, you'll be amazed how much of a difference that makes. There was a study done in England a couple of years back with that class. You all know what that class is, right? How many of you were in that class in high school? The class that isn't going to graduate because they're not going to pass English. They took a school with that class, all seniors, that everyone had given up on, and they just gave them all tennis balls. Can you imagine giving projectile weapons to that class? That takes guts. But sometimes it takes guts to affect change. They handed them tennis balls and they said, you know what? When you're not doing anything with your hands, just hand the ball back and forth, bounce it on your desk, dribble it around your hand, do whatever it takes. Within a year, they didn't have that class in that school. They mainstreamed the whole class of them within a year. What a simple little adjustment to just add some stimuli into a boy's environment. That should inspire us all. It is so easy and so simple. Other differences between boys and girls. Outlook. This is where we get into the more fuzzy side of psychology, right? This is Freud we're talking about. But we don't like Freud anymore, right? Freud's no good. So we're going to say this is John Gray. We all know John Gray, right? Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. If you haven't read this book, read this book. Every word in this book is true. I know everyone in this book. I am half the people in this book. I mean, this is a wonderful book on just the differences between how men and women see the world. Again, we're talking averages, generalities. I know people fall on all kinds of spectrums, but see if it doesn't sound like it makes a little bit of sense to you. Girls tend to internalize. Boys tend to externalize. Girls see this big, wide world out there, and they think that there's a reflection of that world within themselves. It's one of the reasons girls tend to be a little more emotional. They take things to heart a little bit more. It's an endearing quality. It can be a little exasperating sometimes. You all know Jeff Foxworthy, right? The country comedian. You might be a redneck if. Well, he loves to tell a story about how he has 2 daughters, age 8 and 10. His brother lives next door to him, has 3 daughters, ages 8, 10, and 12. Foxworthy's grandparents have 9 grandchildren. They are all girls between the ages of 8 and 12. He lives in the world of the pre-adolescent girl. And you can make your own decision as to whether that's a good thing or not. He claims he loves it. He loves living with all these girls, but it really bothers him that he spends all his time running around trying to figure out what people are crying about. Why? Because girls tend to internalize. Everything affects them very strongly. Boys, on the other hand, tend to externalize. Their worldview, the world is out there. It's big, it's wonderful, it's wide, and if I don't get out there and find my place in it, it's going to pass me by. I've got to go out and find my place in the world. Leonard Sachs is a researcher who wrote Why Gender Matters. He's also on your list there. He theorizes this is why boys engage in so much risky behavior, right? Because you take any 10-year-old boy, and you stand him up here in front of you, and you ask him, and he will tell you, yes, if someone were to take their bike to the roof of the school and ride it off the roof of the school, they're likely to get hurt. What will that 10-year-old boy now do that since you've put the idea in his head, right? He's going to go get his bike, he's going to take it to the top of the roof, and he's going to ride it off the roof. Why? Because the fact that they're going to get hurt has no effect on me. Remember that famous question that all mothers have asked their sons at some point in your life? If everybody were to jump off a cliff, would you do it too? Oddly enough, the answer is often yes. The fact that they're all screaming on the way down does not affect me one bit. This leads to a real difference in how boys and girls want to do good in the world. All people want to do good in this world. If that isn't part of your personality, we have a name for you. You're a sociopath. It is very rare, and it's just not anything we have to deal with. All people want to do something good in this world, but how you do something good in this world depends on your outlook, right? Here's the example of this one. Here's a problem. We have a problem. Take your average 11-year-old girl and say, there's a problem. Is she going to fix the problem? No. She's going to get 6 of her friends. And she's going to call them over and say, look, there's a problem. Are they going to fix the problem? No. They're all going to get 6 more of their friends. And they're going to gather up, and when there's 500 people staring at that problem doesn't have a chance. That makes perfect sense to most of the women I know. Why would you attack a problem by yourself when you could attack it with 500 people and do it easily and have tea and cookies while you're doing it? It's a social event. That's how you fix problems. Interpersonal communication and cooperation, that's the best way to address problems, right? You don't go it alone. You get help. That's how you change the world, right? Every guy I know looks at that and says, that's a committee. And committees never fixed anything, right? You know, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. If you take your average 11-year-old boy and you show him that problem, what's he going to do? He's going to fix the problem, or he's going to try, right? You ask your average husband, and what's he going to do? He's going to fix the problem. John Gray says this is one of the biggest problems in communication between men and women, because women will say, look, I have a problem. And what does the man do? He's just heading for the door. He's going to Sears. He's going to go fix the problem. And she says, but I just wanted to talk about the problem. See the cross communication? Very, very different approaches to how the world works. Basically, guys work on the Home Depot approach. Rules and tools. Right? This is how the world works. Show me how the world works. Show me how to manipulate the world to get things done the way they should be done, and I'm a happy man. Right? Any 10-year-old boy has already figured out the word manipulate has no negative connotations whatsoever. That's what they want to do. And that's what a tool is a way to change the world. That's what boys want. Do you think that these psychological differences will have any effect on how boys read and what they read and how we're going to promote reading to them? They better, or we're never going to reach them. If you don't understand the way so many boys see the world, how are you possibly going to communicate to them that reading is something that they will want to do for the rest of their life? So as we'll talk a little bit later about what boys like to read. Remember those differences. Let them inform how you see boys in reading. One more difference between boys and girls. Boys lack role models. When it comes to reading, boys are desperate for role models. Why? 90% of elementary school teachers in America are female. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that says that women can't help boys learn how to read. But you know what? Every now and then, we want to see people who look like us doing the things that we want to do. And boys don't see that. Librarians, it's worse. When I first became a children's librarian, I went to my first children's librarians conference. 200 people in a great big room. We listened to the first session. After the first hour, first break came along, got up, headed for the restroom. What did I find? A piece of notebook paper ripped out of someone's notebook with the word women scrawled on it, taped to the front of the men's room door. They weren't going to wait in line at the women's room when there was a men's room there and no one to use it, right? I'll give that children's librarian the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she didn't notice me there. You know, I don't stand out in a group of children's librarians or anything, would I? No. But her point was well taken. 200 attendees, I was the only one. You know what? If you grow up being a boy trying to read, you get used to that old Sesame Street song running through your head. One of these things is not like the other. And 9 times out of 10, it's me. Boys notice this. You think boys don't notice that the only people they see that read are female? And you notice, not just in school and libraries, here's the deep, dark secret. I got no research to back this up. This is my own observation. But for 90% of households in America, I think this is true. And I'm going to start it off with a very simple question. Anyone can shout out the answer. Where's the proper place for a man to read? The bathroom. Everyone knows that. There we go. Doesn't take even thought, right? I know, it's a stereotype, it's a joke. But you know what? It wouldn't be funny if there wasn't a little bit of truth in it, right? So, okay, men read in the bathroom. Hopefully the door is closed while you're doing this. My little suggestion to you. Where's the proper place for a boy to read? In his room. Well, in the bathroom too, just like Dad. But in his room, with the door shut, and the blanket over his head, right, and the flashlight out. That's the way. You know, if you're a guy, most of us can think back and remember. Oh yeah, I remember reading like that, right? How about the iconography? Those shadow pictures, those hallmark moments where they show a boy reading outside, right? Just all you see is the silhouette. Where is he reading? In a tent, right? Or where else? Keep going. A treehouse, beside a tree, in the woods. You get the picture, right? Every self-respecting boy knows the proper way to read is you take your book, you put it in your back pocket, which is why all books for boys need to be paperback. You get on your bike, you ride 12 miles outside of town, you prop yourself up against a tree and you read. That's where you read. I thought my dad was illiterate. I thought at least functionally illiterate. If he could read, I never saw any evidence to this effect. He self-described. Part of his whole shtick, I come from New Hampshire, so you got to understand the shtick is very important here. He's a self-described big, dumb Irish cop. Right? That's how he introduces himself to new people. All right? And, you know, he was a cop, a constable on patrol. That's an acronym. He's not being mean. He was in the military. He didn't like officers. So he never wanted to be a police officer, but he wanted to be a cop. I never saw him read until I got home from college one day. The end of my first year of college, he met me at the door. And he said, "You got a year of American history now, right? We can talk." You know the generation I'm talking about, right? Dad, we haven't talked in 6 years. What are we going to talk about? He said, history. He brought me into his room. I was never allowed in my parents' room. I did not know the reason I was not allowed in my parents' room is because that's where my dad read. He had a huge bookcase, covered an entire wall. Big, comfortable chair right beside it. The bookcase stacked with American history text. He could have taught most of the classes at my college. And he never let me see it. He never shared it with me. Isn't that frightening? But understand, now hopefully if you're here, you're concerned about education, you know, you're concerned about reading. Hopefully the men in your life don't act this way because you won't put up with that silliness. And if you're one of the guys in here, I trust you're not the guys I'm talking about. But understand, the majority of the households, the majority of the boys, what they see is that men read in isolation. No one ever sat us down when we were 12 and said, "Now, Junior, you're 12, you're a man now, make sure if you read no one can see you." But that's what we imbibe. That's what we see every single day. We see women read. We don't see men read. And before anyone makes the obvious objection, I always saw my dad read. Yeah, when? Breakfast table. What was he reading? Newspaper. Did you see your dad read? No. You saw the back of the newspaper in 8 of his fingers. John Gray calls this cave mentality. That's a barrier. You actually didn't see him read, and that was the point. He separates himself out. Men, we need to change that. The guys in this room, I'm talking to 5 or 6 of you, the rest of you can go to sleep for a little while. We can't let this happen because this is a generational issue. The reason we didn't see men read is because our dads didn't read front of us. We need to be caught reading constantly. We need to be caught just with books constantly. If you refuse to read with kids or in front of kids, if you say, reading's my away time, it's my cave time, my separation time, fine. Commit yourself to this. A half an hour a day, sit on your front porch, in your easy chair, anywhere where people are going to be passing by, prop a book in front of your nose and fall asleep for half an hour. That will do more good than anything else you can do, because boys will see you and books together, and they don't see that. If there are men in your organization, if you're a teacher or a librarian, those guys in your organization are golden. Here's your chance for great role modeling. You need to get them into the program. If they refuse to read with kids, well, then part of their uniform needs to be to carry a paperback book around in their back pocket. I don't care if it's a book they're reading. It doesn't matter. They need to be seen with a book all the time. And if they don't do that, I suggest you keep a pile of paperback books on your desk. And every time one of them walks by, reach out, drop it in. That'll get their attention. You won't have to do that more than once, right? One time will be enough to get their attention. It's too important. We need to bring guys into reading situations. In your home, you know what? I hear it from all the times. Oh, I don't read with my kids. My wife does that. Wrong. Go back. Try again. You need to do as much reading with your kids as your wife does. If you're in a school or a library, you need to bring men in to your programs to read to kids, be with kids. It's not that you can't teach them how to read, but you can't be that role model. They're not going to be looking at you as someone who looks like them. That has to be a huge part of what we do. All right, that's the differences as I see them between boys and girls. It doesn't address the problem. Why don't boys read? And here's the hardest part of the whole thing. This is going to make, especially the librarians in the crowd, cringe. How many librarians in the crowd? Oh boy, you guys are really represented here. All right, get ready for the hard part. We turn reading into work. We make it a chore. And librarians are always like, no, we don't. We love reading. We tell kids all the time, reading's fun. That's not what they hear. Communication's a two-way street. It doesn't matter what you say. If that's not what they hear, then you're not doing any good. We, as a society, turn reading into work, and I can prove it. Any children's librarian will tell you there's no shortage of boys in story hour. 3-year-old boys in story hour, 50-50. How many boys do you see in after-school programs when they're 12, 13, 14 years old in libraries? They're almost invisible. We lost them somewhere. And it's where we lost them that makes a big difference. What is reading to a 3-year-old boy? A 3-year-old boy experiences reading in exactly 2 general circumstances. He's sitting on the floor with 12 other kids his age, staring up at someone who's holding a book, telling them a story, and showing them the pictures. Right? It's story hour. We all love story hour, right? Was there anybody who hated story hour? I've never met anyone who hated story hour. Right? Why? Because it's perfect. Right? It's a social activity. And remember, boys are taught to read in isolation. This is not an isolating activity, right? Here we go. There's a bunch of other people there. Someone is telling you a story, not reading, because most 3-year-olds I found out make little connection between the squiggles on the page and what's coming out of your mouth. They're telling you a story and showing you the pictures. And then what do you do after the story's done? You get up, you sing, you dance, you run around the children's room like a chicken with your head cut off. You go over to the craft table and you make something physical using rules and tools. This is perfect. Why? Sound, color, motion, the way the pictures are handled around. Every children's librarian knows how to do this. Story hour shuffle, right? Make sure everybody sees the pictures. All right. Kinetic energy. You get up, you run around, you go over, you make something using rules and tools. Story hour is perfect. You know what the sad news is? For most boys, reading never gets better than when they're 3 years old. That's the height right there. Doesn't get any better than that. It is perfect. The other time that most 3-year-olds experience reading, they're lying flat on their back. There's a pillow under their head. Someone they love is standing right beside them, telling them a story and showing them pictures. It's bedtime reading, right? And what is the express purpose of this activity? Put them to sleep, right? The goal is that by the end of the story, they're going to be asleep. There's not a lot of pressure there, is there? That's pretty good, right? That's a great deal. Once again, it just doesn't get any better than that. Why? Because 2 years later, we do the meanest thing we could ever do to that poor boy. We tend to send him to school. Oh, and that's a dirty, rotten trick. Why? Well, kindergarten, he might get through kindergarten fine. Kindergarten is just story hour writ large, right? That's the beauty of kindergarten, right? If you do it right, kindergarten is just one long story hour. First grade, okay, he might get through. Sometime around second grade, some adult is going to sit that boy down in a chair, and they're going to hand him a book, and they're going to say, read. And he's going to say, no. Reading is when you tell me a story and show me pictures, and we get up and we sing and we dance. And that adult is going to say, we don't sing and dance in second grade. Read. He's going to open that book, and what's the first thing he's going to notice? No pictures. Everybody remembers that. This is not the most traumatic experience of your life. You open that book up, and there are no pictures. Or worse, it's just those line drawings if it's a basal reader. The line drawings, there's no visual stimuli in a line drawing, right? Now, this is just teasing you, saying your picture should be here. That boy looks around, and what does he see? He sees his classmates, half of which are girls, who are, according to the studies, on average, a year and a half ahead of him in language skills. They're picking it up fine. So she, and her over there, she's doing great. And I am stupid. That's the word they use. Might as well get used to it. It's self-defeatist. I hate it, but that's the word that gets kicked around. I'm stupid. Why? Because boys are structured thinkers. You give them 2 pieces of evidence, they'll make a rule out of it. Sound like any men you know? You're not going to change their mind. They pick it up right there. This is a turning point. This is what we call the tipping point. It's usually boys are 7, 8, 9. If your boy is 5 and he's a great reader and you're feeling good about yourself, watch out. I've seen thousands of boys that were great readers when they were 5 be non-readers at 8. And this is why. Because they got a choice at that moment. They can say one of 2 things. Either I can't read. When's the last time you heard a male say, I can't anything? Right? I can't read, or I won't read, or I don't read. It works the same, right? That's when they start identifying themselves as non-readers. They realize that other kids their age, the best readers are almost all girls. The poorest readers are almost all boys. And this is hard. And I either have to admit that I can't do this, or I have to say that I won't do this. Do you know what the outcome of that is? Here's a scary stat. I promise no more scary stats. I get one more. You just got to hear. 1 in 3 boys in America is in a remedial reading program by the time they're in the 3rd grade. Is that not the scariest thing? I couldn't read in 3rd grade. That was me. I spent my entire elementary days in remedial reading. You know what the worst part of that is? Most kids that go into remedial reading don't get out. It's a trap. It's terrible. And here's why. I told you the big problem, we turn reading into work. What do we do with those boys that fall behind? We stick them in remedial reading. What is remedial reading? Give them a, what'd you say? A workbook. Oh, that was terrible. Or worksheets, those mimeograph worksheets. They give you drills. They teach you the nuts and bolts of reading. They try and teach you how to read. There's a book on your list there that you have to read. It will change your life. It's by Stephen Krashen. It's called The Power of Reading. He makes a persuasive argument that you can't teach someone how to read. It doesn't work. In 30 years of research, we have no evidence that structured instruction ever taught anyone how to read. Doesn't that put a crimp in your job description if you're a reading teacher? No, because I'm going to give you the answer now. But it's a complexity argument. Language is too complex. If you try and break language up into its tiny little pieces and spoon feed the pieces, you're going to be at it for a long time. Think about vocabulary. Someone was asking me earlier about vocabulary. How do we teach vocabulary in this country? Vocabulary words, right? 10 a week. It's almost like the 10 Commandments, right? 10 a week. All right? Let's say that a boy has got the most involved, responsible, caring parents on the face of the earth. They give that boy 10 vocabulary words a week during all school vacations, including the summer break. 50 weeks out of the year, that boy gets 10 words a week of vocabulary. It takes 40,000 words of vocabulary to read your average newspaper. How long is that boy going to be studying before he can read a newspaper? Math whizzes in the crowd? How many? No one's figured that one out yet? It's 80 years. Yeah, someone's got it. 80 years. You can't teach that way. You know what the only way to teach proficiency is? To read. That's it. You have to practice the skill. That is the only determining factor. Stephen Krashen will actually convince you that the only indicator of how well someone's going to read is how much time they spend with language. It's how much time you spend reading that matters. Nothing to do with instruction. Funny enough, nothing even to do with the level of reading that you do. And here's how we turn reading into work again. Reading level. Grade level reading, right? We all know what reading level our kids are. Why? Because we get it on a little report every year. Usually a couple of times a year. You'll get some number that says 4.6. Sixth month of the fourth year, that's his reading level, right? And for most of us, we blow our stacks when we see it, right? Because if you're in fifth grade and you're a 4.2, you're reading almost a year behind grade level. Oh, horrors. Let's think about this for a second. Grade level reading, that's the average level at which all kids in fourth grade read. Fourth grade reading level right there. We know that on average, boys are reading a year and a half behind girls. So if that's fourth grade reading level, where are the girls reading? 3/4 of a year to a year above. Where's the average boy reading? 3/4 of a year to a year below. If you hand the average fourth grade reading level book to your average fourth grade girl, the odds are, the studies show, you just handed her a book that's significantly below her natural reading level. Is she going to like you? Oh, yeah. And she's going to love reading, too. Why? This is easy. I can do this. This is great. It's fun. Give me another one. Isn't that the response we get from so many girls? Give me another one. It's not something we hear from a lot of our boys, right? Why? Because if you hand the average fourth grade reading level book to your average fourth grade boy, you just gave him a book that is significantly above his natural reading level. Again. It's the again that gets us, right? If you did that once or twice, they might get mad at you, but that's all about it. For 12 years, we force feed grade level reading to boys, and a lot of them never have the capacity to do the reading we give them. If someone made you do something that was too hard for you every week of every year for 12 years, would you be excited about doing that on your own? I don't think so. And this is why so many boys in our society, do you know what graduation means to them first and foremost? It means I never have to read another book. That's it. It's over. And you'll hear them say that. That's it. The last English assignment, last book I ever have to read. Why? Because it just never was fun. It was always work, and it doesn't make any sense. Reading attainment, language attainment, has little to nothing to do with the level of reading you do. It has everything to do with the volume of reading that you do. And I see this all the time as a librarian. I got to tell you about a very common occurrence that happens working down in the children's room. And, Junior comes down the stairs. Junior, fifth grade boy. Comes down the stairs, and he looks stressed. Let's just be honest about it. His shoulders are down, his head is down, his eyes are drooping, he's dragging his feet. He is not having a good time. Who's right behind him? Sister. Oh, actually, sister wouldn't be too bad. Although sometimes they could be. I have 4 older sisters. Bad flashbacks there. One of his parents is behind him, and you hear this line, "Go get a book. We're not leaving until you get a book. Don't argue with me. Go get a book." Sound like anyone you know? Sound like you sometimes? It happens. We all get to that stressed out point. Junior goes, he gets the book he wants. Summer reading is killing me. He's sending you a message, right? He hands you the book. What's the first thing most adults do when they get a book from a kid? Turn it sideways. Yep, it's too short, too easy. Look in the back. RL 2.6. What's that mean? They turn to the librarian. Boy, what a wonderful spot for us to be in. It means second grade reading level. Second grade reading level? You're in fifth grade. No. Give me that. Go back and get a real book. Ooh, you can tell how painful that is, right? Because you just told that boy that what speaks to him, what he wants to read, isn't real reading. So I must be a bad reader. That's only natural. Boys are structured thinkers, right? Give them two pieces of evidence, they'll make a rule out of it. And 5 years later, they're going to be talking to Michael Smith, and they're going to say, no, I don't read. Despite the fact they might have a book stuck in their backpack, right? It's probably a book that they're not going to show you. Right? We don't want them to read this. We want them to read Sharon Creech, Walk Two Moons. 270 pages of Newbery Award-winning literature. Doggone it! I shouldn't pick on Sharon Creech. Sharon Creech is a fine author. I like her. She might be the most boy-unfriendly writer on the face of the earth. Just sit down and read Granny Torelli Makes Soup sometime. It's an entire book where nothing happens. I know, it sounds like a Seinfeld episode. The entire book is 2 days of a grandmother and her granddaughter watching soup boil. They're not even making the soup. The soup is already made. They're just watching it boil for 2 days and talking. All right, painful book to read. And it's the kind of book we give kids all the time. But you know what? If Junior wants to read this, and you want him to read Granny Torelli Makes Soup or Walk Two Moons, you got yourself a problem. Here's your solution. Instead of saying you can't read this, you say, oh, if you're going to read that, go get 6 more. And he's going to say, wait a minute, you're going to make me go get 6 more funny books? This is good. I like this. Why? Because if he spends 2 hours reading 7 of these, he'll get just as much language attainment as he will from reading that other book for 2 hours. It's the time spent. And you know what? He'll get more out of reading these. You know why? He'll read them. If this is his choice, he is not going to read Sharon Creech no matter what you do. You can't make him do it. And there's no reason to. Reading in volume is what matters. Remember, it's not the attainment. It's not the proficiency. It's the amount of time they spend with language that's going to make them better readers. And it's making them better readers and enjoying it, that's going to make them lifelong readers. And that really is our goal. How do we fix this problem? Because frankly, if you've got a son who's in remedial reading in school, remedial reading isn't going to do the job. In fact, while all those kids who are behind in reading, like I was, are sitting in class doing workbooks, what's the rest of the class doing? They're reading. That's reading class, right? And they're doing what works, whereas your son is doing what doesn't work. He's going to fall farther and farther and farther behind every single day. You can fix that. Why? Or how? Stop making reading work. Make it easy for them. You know what the easiest way to do that is? Read to them. Never stop reading to boys. You can stop reading to boys when they turn 90 and they can't hear you anymore. That's about it. That's where you can cut this off. Stephen Krashen, once again, powerful argument. Listening to stories being read out loud has just as much reading attainment as reading the story yourself. Isn't that an eye-opener? Actually, I shouldn't say that. It's just about as much. There's one part of language you cannot get from hearing a story read out loud. Do you know what that part is? Spelling, very good. Someone's thinking. Yeah, and I'm a terrible speller, you can tell. Spell check is a wonderful thing. Yeah. Oh, yes, you're stepping on my punchline, but yes, that's very good. That's right where we're headed. First and foremost, though, the social aspect of actually reading to boys adds something to it right there. I obviously get called in when boys don't read well. That's my gig. When someone has a problem with their son, they call me in. I sometimes do some work with them. And the first question I always ask a boy who's having trouble learning to read is, do you want to learn how to read? No one ever asked him. I've never met a kid yet who'd ever been asked that question before. Have you bothered to ask your kids, do you want to learn how to read? No. You expect them to want to learn how to read. Very often the answer I get is, no, I don't want to learn how to read. Why? Because if I learn how to read, people are going to stop reading to me. And they don't like that, right? They want to be read to. The last time they enjoyed reading was story hour, when someone was reading to them. Bedtime reading, someone's reading to them. They love that. The sad thing is, they're right. Very often, kids turn 7, we stop reading to them. Why? We had all the answers. When they were 3, we had the answers. We just had to not stop doing it. Got to tell you, hardest part of my job as library director, speaking to the Rotary Club. Oh, this is horrible. I mean, this is, by and large, 50-year-old businessmen, right, who just paid way too much money for a bad lunch. You're a Rotarian, aren't you? Oh, because you had that look like, oh, I know this is coming. Any Rotarians in the crowd? I used to be a Rotarian. I can say this. None? Jeez, wow. Well, 50-year-old businessmen paid too much for a bad lunch. Most Rotary clubs don't allow drinks, so they didn't have a martini with lunch. You know, they're not in a good mood. And you get to entertain them for 20 minutes. And what are they doing for that whole 20 minutes? Checking their BlackBerries, checking the messages on their phone. With the BlackBerries, they can actually be typing back to the office while you're talking. It's a terrible audience to work with. And I've worked with 2-year-olds, and, you know, they're nothing compared to Rotarians. Rotarians are the worst. But they give us a check every year. You go and sing for your supper. All right. One day I just finished story hour, and I was just not happy, and I knew I had to go to Rotary Club, and I need to do something. I grabbed a set of the setups off the desk as I left. I went to there, and when they announced me, I handed out a craft to everyone in the room. And I told them stories for 20 minutes. I recreated story hour for 50-year-old businessmen. You know what? They loved it. They ate it up. It was wonderful. Why? Because for a lot of them, the last time they enjoyed reading was when they were 3 years old. And I brought them back to a time when reading was easy, it was fun, and you know what? I bet they were a lot more motivated to maybe go and start a book for the first time in 20 years. Never stop reading to boys, right? Audiobooks, oh man. You got to understand here. I work in a commuter town. Everyone in my town gets up at 7 o'clock in the morning, drives to Boston. Hour away. That's what they do. We have a huge audiobook collection. 80% of the users, easy, are male. You just watch the audiobook collection, and it is guys' day at the audiobook collection all the time. If you took any one of those guys and you put them up against that wall and you shined a bright light in their eyes and you said, "Do you want me to read you a story?" Every one of them would say, "No, I don't want you to read me a story. Just give me my audiobook and let me go." Audiobook, read me a story. What's the difference? There's a difference. Who can figure it out? You're in your car. It's antisocial. It's all by yourself. It's reading in isolation. It's reading that guys understand, right? You take your audiobook, you get in your car, you shut the door, you lock the door, you roll the window up, you put the audiobook in, and you're happy. If guys react so well to audiobooks, why do we think that boys won't? We think this is a great approach. In my library, we made a big, bold statement in town, publicly, press release, the whole thing. We were going to build an audiobook collection for school-age kids. And the next day, I had 2 teachers at my desk. They said, you can't do that. The kids will try and do their homework reading using audiobooks. You know what I said? I'm sure they will, because I went to your curriculum, and I pulled every book I could off of it and bought the audio for it. Why? Why? Because you get just as much from listening to the story, and it's easier, and you can read at a higher level because you're not mispronouncing words. You know, reading above your reading level is difficult because even if you can figure out the word in front of you, it's not going to sound right in your head. You're not going to connect it to the words you know. It's just slowing you down and frustrating you, right? All you're doing by reading a story out loud or listening to an audiobook is you're taking the physical step out of reading. That part where you take the words off the paper and physically transfer them into your head. Once they get into your head, the process is exactly the same, right? If you've ever taught a dyslexic, you know that that physical step is a stupid reason to get in the way of a good story. I've taught a lot of dyslexics in my life. And you know what? They will pick up language. They will read better even with their learning disability if you can raise their reading level in general. And how do you do that? You just expose them to a ton of stories. Tell them stories. Read them stories. Sing them songs. Those are just stories in rhyme with a rhythm, right? Audiobooks, anytime you get in a car to go on a trip, get an audiobook for the whole family to listen to together, right? Perfect Christmas present, Discman. I know everyone says, "Oh, no, Discman. I'll never talk to him again," right? Once he gets a Discman, that's it. Conversation's over for the rest of his life. No, that's because you've been giving him, all he's been listening to is music. Give him the Discman and a really cool book on tape. And now you get gifts for the next 10 years of his life, right? Give him something that's going to stimulate him. Better yet, go to your library and demand, I know librarians in the crowd are going to get really mad at me, demand that they have an audiobook collection for kids. It's only fair. It's how they're going to reach out. A lot of libraries don't do a good job of dealing with boys. It's not because they don't want to. They just don't necessarily know how sometimes. We don't think about it. This will focus them. Audiobook collections are great for boys. We do a program in my town called Literary Lunch. This is the program that every town in America needs to start immediately. Why? I'm from New Hampshire. You know all those stereotypes you heard about New Hampshire? How, you know, country folk like me, where everything about us is simple and cheap? Yeah, they're right. Everything that I do is simple and cheap. Literary Lunch costs you nothing, does not take brain surgery type brains. Simple as pie. We allow 4th, 5th, and 6th graders to sign up on a sign-up sheet for a week, a book, and a reader. All three at the top of the sheet. They sign up. If they get into the literary lunch that they want, they get to go in on Monday, cut to the front of the lunch line, which is a big part of the program. They love that, right? They cut to the front of the lunch line. They take their lunch out of that madhouse we call a cafeteria. They bring it to a classroom. 25 of them sit down at a desk in a classroom and eat their lunch while we adults, usually public librarians, read them a book. That's it. That's the whole program. I told you. Cheap and simple. That's the way we operate. But boy, what an amazing thing. We start reading at the start of lunch on Monday. We read till the bell. We put in the bookmark. And on Tuesday, we pick up right from that point and we keep reading. And we keep reading until the book's done. 4, 5, 6 days. We usually pick books so we can finish in that much time. And we just read them a story. And the kids can't believe it. They can't believe that an adult would actually take the time out of their lives to read to 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And so they all ask us, the first time we introduced the concept, they ask us the same question, different words, but it's the same question. What's the catch? Right? Am I going to get tested on this? We've taught them, haven't we? We've trained them. They know any reading worth doing is worth testing. Right? No, you're not going to get tested on this. Am I going to have to write a book report? They're just so used to us giving us work. You can't just expose a kid to a story. No, you got to make it work. So no, we're not going to ask you to write a book report. Am I going to have to read out loud? It's a big issue for a lot of kids. No. Just sit down and listen, and if you get tired, put your head down on the desk and go to sleep. We'll catch up on the story. We recreated bedtime reading for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And you know what? They love it. It's the most popular program we do in the school. Kids try to sign up for 12 or 13 of these. We don't have enough classrooms. We don't have enough readers. We're lucky if the kids can get into 3 a year. But they'd get into 12 if they could. And you know what I usually hear at the end of 20 minutes of lunch? We'll skip recess. Keep reading. No, you don't know me. I want you outside running around. That's part of the deal, right? You're physical beings. Go run around. Don't worry, we'll finish the story tomorrow. It's a simple program. It's easy as can be. Doesn't cost anything. Puts the school librarian in the center of things because they're the booking agent, right? And it makes the school librarian's job that much more prominent because school libraries, face it, folks, dollar for dollar is the best education investment you have. I can say that. I'm a public librarian. I honestly think that if you're going to put money into kids and it's short, you put it in your school library. Why? Because that's where you have the contact. School librarian books the rooms, does the paperwork, books the readers, tries to get, the public librarians do an awful lot of the reading, but other faculty members, especially male faculty members, administrators, they're nice to get in. Businessmen in town, the police chief gets about 1 a year of these things. Don't forget the most popular person in any school, principal. Are you a principal? Oh, yeah, you've got it. The custodian, of course. I mean, the custodian's the only adult in most kids' lives that don't give them any work. They love the custodian. And custodians very often really like kids. I mean, they could be custodians anywhere. They're in school, they like kids, and they don't get enough face time with kids. It's a great connection, and it highlights the fact that this isn't work. That's the custodian. It can't be work. That's the custodian. They don't ever give us work. That's really, teachers will tell you, we all remember when we were kids, reading at the end of the day, teachers read 20 minutes at the end of every day. It was dessert. right? If you're good, I'll read another chapter to you today, right? And it didn't matter what they read. It was the best part of school. Teachers today will tell you they don't have time. They've got to get ready for the test. The curriculums are too complicated. They've got way too much to do. They've been asked to do too much. You can't have classroom time for reading. I'm too busy to read to kids. At which point you repeat that line back to them. And they might say, all right, maybe I'll find a few minutes. Okay. But we have to find time outside of the curriculum in order to read to kids. I did this talk in Wisconsin a couple of years ago. A couple of months later, I got an email from a high school librarian. And the email started with the line, I can't believe I tried this. See, I knew it was going to be good, right? She said, I was thinking about your literary lunch idea, about reading outside the curriculum. And I thought, I want to do that, but I want to really reach the kids that need it. Who in my high school really desperately needs that kind of a program? The varsity football team. Huh? She asked the coach if she could ride the away bus. And on the first day, she asked the coach not to introduce this, not to give any kind of warning. As the bus rolled out of the parking lot on the first away game, she stood up in front of the entire varsity football team and started reading a book. The place went silent. Absolutely dead silent. The kids were shocked. And then they were interested. And then they were into it. She read all the way out and all the way back. Every single away game all year long. She picked wonderful sports books with lots of action, and the kids got into it. Some of them even fell asleep on the way to a football game. The coaches loved it. Why? Because any football coach will tell you your away record is always worse than your home record. Why? Because you spent an hour on the bus frittering your energy away, right? Throwing things, running around, wrestling in the back. By the time you get there, you're in no shape to play football. When this team got there, they were relaxed and rested and focused and together, and they did fine. It was a great experiment. If she can read to the varsity high school football team on the away bus, we have no excuses for not finding a time to read to kids. I don't care what it is. Be creative. Find the time to read to kids and do as much of it as you possibly can. Which leads to the question, read what? What do we read to boys? Anything? You know what? I'm going to have a little problem with that. Let me tell you a story, and then maybe this will fill this in, because that's a good lead up to a great story. One of my librarians, one of the librarians who works for me in Greenland, New Hampshire, came to me early this school year and told me this story. She said her son Nick had just entered the 6th grade, 11 years old, your typical boy, right? Little rowdy, little rambunctious, didn't sit still well in school, but a nice kid, a good kid. Not one of the great English scholars of his generation, right? And everybody knew it. You know that terrible position to be in? You know that it's the first day of school and you know the teacher knows who you are. If you never had that experience, just think about how terrifying that can be. But his teacher knew ahead of time he was going to have problems. But you know what? The first 2 weeks of school, Nick did great. He passed in every homework assignment. He always did his reading. He jumped up and was part of the class discussion. He aced all of his tests for 2 weeks. He did fantastic. And then he stopped. All in one day. I mean, just flat stopped. Stopped doing his homework, stopped doing his reading, stopped saying anything in class. He even got to the point where the teacher would hand out the quizzes, and he would write his name on the top of the quiz and hand it right back to the teacher. That's attitude, right? That's, if you want to get a message to your teacher, there it is. That's attitude. And so what did the teacher do? She called Mom in for a conference. You know, it's kind of funny. If Nick had not had those 2 good weeks, he'd never gotten in trouble, right? He could have gone the whole school year doing just what he was doing in those second 2 weeks, and the teacher wouldn't even thought twice about it. But now she knew he could do the work. And that's what she said. She called Mom in, and she said, you know, he has no excuses. He can do the work. He proved it, right? He's just being lazy. He's just giving me attitude. And Mom said, well, you know, you have to understand. The first 2 weeks of school, you're reading Maniac McGee, which has got to be one of the great boy books of all time. Right? He loved it. He ate it up. He would hurry home to do his reading. He would do his reading twice. He'd read the homework assignment and then go back and read from the beginning to find the good parts again, the funny parts, and the interesting parts, and the exciting parts. He couldn't get enough of it. Right? He was excited to go in and talk about this book that meant so much to him. And after 2 weeks, they finished Maniac McGee, and they started reading Julia the Wolves. And Mom had to tell the teacher, you got to understand, he really hates this book. And you don't understand. He really hates this. He's embarrassed. There are things in this book about girls he does not want to know at age 11. All right? He does not like this book. Right? He was crying, arguing, yelling. He actually tried to negotiate extra chores if Mom would let him not do his reading homework. And that's just not Nick, right? I mean, and Mom said to the teacher, you got to understand, he really, really hates this book. And the teacher's response, well, of course he does. The boys always do. She not only dismissed half of her class in one sweep, but she did it on a generational basis, right? Every year, the boys always hate this book. Year after year after year, every year that she assigns it, which leads to the big question, why do you assign it? Well, she has her reasons, right? They read a boy book, although arguably Maniac McGee is a book that speaks to just about everybody. But, okay, they read a boy book, then they're going to read a girl book. You know, I've got to assign the whole class something. Why? We have got this thing in my town. I've been yelling at the teachers long enough, and we have a good relationship. I say I yell at them, I say I pick on them. I'll talk about my relationship with the teachers. It's become a joke now. The interaction between them. But I got them convinced. They, more often than not now, do free reading assignments. Here you go, on Monday, they assign, go get a book at the library, bring it in, check it in tomorrow, and in a week, stand up and tell the whole class what you read and why you liked it. Isn't that a more positive experience than having the whole class sit there and hate a book? We can change the structure of our schools, little bits at a time, but we can make a huge difference. And we start by recognizing that there are some books that appeal more to boys than girls, and some books that appeal to an awful lot of boys if you stop and think about it. The first best point, nonfiction, right? Nonfiction books. They feed the way boys think, right? Externally. Rules and tools. Help me to understand the world around me and manipulate it. I'm a happy man. That's very much what nonfiction does. By the way, someone want to tell me why else boys tend to like nonfiction? Pictures. We took the pictures away from them when they were 7. We had the right answer and we just stopped doing it. Pictures are visual stimulation for boys. It helps wake their brains up. Tracking illustrations across a page actually is a physical kinetic activity that helps wake their brains up. Not only that, but nonfiction tends to come in these nice short little packets, right? Most nonfiction written today, little bits, go ahead and read what's there, and then you can get up and go do something about it. And come back later and read some more. Very much the way boys like to read. Also, illustrations actually will help your reading level. If you're reading below level, the illustrations will give you visual clues that will help you to understand the language. It will raise your reading level, if only temporarily. But it gives them a chance to read closer to their level. Nonfiction is great. And there's some really good stuff out there. This book really sucks. And that's what it's called. That's the title of the book. It's about vacuum cleaners and syringes and leeches and all kinds of things that have sucking action. It's a nonfiction book to understand the world. And guess what? Most kids think it's kind of funny. It's covered with suction cups. You really want to promote this book sometime, you have to wet all the suction cups to make this work because they're not strong enough without a little bit of moisture. But you just walk into a group of kids sometime and slam it against the wall and walk away. It'll stick to the wall. They'll have to take the book off the wall to see what it is. I guarantee there's no boy on the face of the earth that could resist going and grabbing that book. Right? That's a good book. All right. Other thing, and you're going to see this is going to be a trend as I talk about boys reading all through it. Understand that some of the stuff that I read is a little edgy, right? You've gotten that already, right? Back to that old rule, it's insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. You're really going to want to shake things up. And here's part of the reason. Boys are rules-based creatures. Would everyone like to cringe now? Really? Doesn't it seem like they're out there sometimes purposely breaking rules? You do that, don't you? You go out and you purposely break rules, right? We did that when I was a kid, yeah. When I was in prep school, I went to a little boarding school in New Hampshire, and we had this 25-page pamphlet called the Student Handbook. It had all the rules in school. And it was given to us the first day of school every year. You know, big assembly, big ceremony. Here's your rule. These are the rules to follow to be a part of this society. You know the whole spiel, right? And what did we do every night as soon as dinner was over? We all went back to our dorms. All the guys would get together in the common area with our handbook and our highlighters. And we'd start highlighting the rules we'd already broken. With what absolute goal in mind? Break them all. By the end of the year, you got to break every one of them, right? We all did that. I don't know of a single girls' dorm that ever did that. Every guy's dorm I was ever in, we did that. Boys are rules-based creatures. We think the world is run on rules and structure, and we got to know where those rules are. And where do you know where the line is if you don't dance over it every now and then? It's part of that whole externalizing mindset that boys have. They're going to be drawn to edgy subjects. It's natural. You've got two choices. You let them try and feed this need that they have in the media. That's a good idea, right? Or you let them do it in a literature-rich environment. You let them do it while they're improving their reading skills. They're going to want to explore this stuff. So give it to them. Let them have some fun. Why do they have to love the stuff that just drives you crazy? Because it drives you crazy. That's the point. Oh, yuck, the encyclopedia of everything nasty. Believe it or not, folks, this is one of the best sellers in my library. Oh, yes. It is just full of nonfiction tidbits about leeches and vomit and mushrooms and you know, all kinds of just bizarre things. Feeds that need. You really want to have some fun with a boy? Sit down sometime with the book between you and say, pick a number between 1 and 199. And when they give you that number, flip open the book, read the first headline on that page. Read the whole paragraph. Don't stop, no matter what it is. I guarantee you the first one they pick is going to really gross you out. But then you spin the book around, and he says to you, pick a number between 1 and 199. You pick a number, and he has to read that whole paragraph too. Now, not only have you incorporated nonfiction reading, you've made it an active social activity, and it's fun. What a concept. Understand that most boys think of reading as a solitary, sedentary activity. They read in isolation, and they're expected to read sitting quietly for 3 hours at a time. They don't want to do that. Make it a game. Make it fun. Make it an activity. Another great book every household should have if you have a boy in the household. The Worst Case Scenario Survival Handbook. Flip this one open and say, you're swimming in the ocean and you feel a shark bite your leg. What do you do? Quick. Say it. You're getting help from the peanut gallery. You going to take her advice? Sure, kick it in the nose, because that's what they do in the newspaper, in the movies, right? Unfortunately, scientists have recently found out that sharks have no feeling in their noses, so you're dead. Sorry. Anyone got a better idea? Kick it in the eye. See, the one who's already dead has now come up with the answer as she's sinking to the bottom of the ocean. Yeah, go for its eyes. That'll make them let go. That's the kind of scenario that's in this thing. Flip it open to any page, and you're not going to believe what's in there. Your car just went off a bridge and into the water. It's starting to sink. What do? You turn a corner. You're walking in the woods. You turn a corner, and there, standing on a rock, staring you in the eyes, is a mountain lion. What do? You get knocked out of an airplane without a parachute. What do? All right. These are not the kind of things you're likely to run into, but they're the kind of things that boys are likely to be interested in. Right? This is fun stuff. It's got all these really cool pictures in here, and it's got all the right answers and all the wrong answers, and why. And it's a fun social activity. You really want a good party, give this to 5 or 6 boys about the same age. Let them sit in a corner and just go through this thing and just find the really cool ones and figure out this is a great thing. And they'll read the answers. They will sit there as a group. 5 or 6 12-year-old boys will sit in a circle for hours reading and laughing. That's a good combination. I like that. Other great nonfiction out there. I know I'm hitting nonfiction. There's a reason I'm hitting nonfiction this hard. Study done in Canada just a couple of years ago. Roy Doron was the researcher. He got a government grant to sit there and watch a classroom library and write down Who took out what for free reading assignments? Boys in this study, 10,000 free reading choices he saw, which just goes to show if you can get a government grant for education, you never have to work again, right? 10,000 reading choices. Boys in this class chose nonfiction, 3 nonfiction books for every 4 fiction books when they had a chance to just sit down and do free reading. Isn't that incredible? Almost half of their reading in nonfiction. And then he went and he added up the books in the library. 85% fiction. Boys chose almost half of their reading in nonfiction, despite the fact that there was almost no nonfiction to choose from. They love it. You need to promote it. It's reasonable to think that boys will spend more than half of their free reading time, given the choice, reading nonfiction. Of course, I told you about those free reading assignments they have in my town. I'll hand out 100 books in an afternoon when an entire class gets this assignment, and I know a significant percentage of them are going to come back the next day as unacceptable for a free reading assignment. Doesn't that just sound dumb? Unacceptable for a free reading assignment? Come on, it's a free reading assignment. The reason? I finally convinced them not to send them back because they're too short. I can't convince them not to send them back because they're nonfiction. See if this sounds familiar. I hear adults, teachers, librarians, parents all the time. They'll see a boy pick out a nonfiction book and they'll say, well, that's fine. Now go get something you can read. They're going to read it. It's reading. You're telling him that what he considers reading isn't what you consider reading, and you just lost him, right? There's great nonfiction. The Radioactive Boy Scout, the frightening true story of a whiz kid and his homemade nuclear reactor. What boy could possibly say no to a book like that? He's 16. He built a working nuclear reactor. His idea of safety was rubber gloves. He didn't always use them. But he made a working reactor. It worked so well that by the time the authorities caught up to him, they could see the potting shed where he made it at night. And then some kid in the back of the class, when I'm doing that book talk, says, wait a minute, when the authorities caught up with him, is that legal? No. When the authorities catch up with him, he packed his working nuclear reactor in the trunk of his car and drove it through a suburban neighborhood. Is the boy a genius? Probably. Is he an idiot? Definitely. Is he a terrorist? Technically. And with that joke, every boy in your group is going to want to read that thing. I talked about visuals. We took visuals away from boys when they started reading fiction at age 7. Well, now we're giving it back. Great series. By the way, the books that I'm talking about here, they're all in that handout I gave you. I know some of you are writing things down desperately. I'm sorry, it's already in the handout. And the handout, the book list handout, is a small part of what's on my website. My website's got 3 times that many books easily, plus my book talks, my little commercials. So go on, you can pick out tons of books that any boy would want to read. And here's one of the best set, Kathleen Dewey's The Time Soldiers series. It's a little sci-fi fantasy series. You know, you've all probably heard of Magic Treehouse. It's a nice little series. A lot of boys like it. It's a little dull. This is the same basic idea. Kids go through the portal. They go have amazing adventures. All the adventures are the same. Just like Magic Treehouse, they go and they see dinosaurs. They go see the Wild West and samurais and mummies and all that stuff. The one difference, of course, being this is just jam-packed with computer-generated illustrations. Kids get CGI. They take one look at this, you want to see their eyes pop open. This is a great moment. Give them back their visuals. We're realizing this now. There are books out there that have heavy visual content. When you start talking about that, we start talking very quickly about something called graphic novels, which is basically grown-up comic books, right? They're just comic books in full book format. And a lot of librarians and teachers kind of like graphic novels. And so a lot of kids, it's acceptable to a lot of kids. You really want to get them? You want to know what they really want? They want manga. Manga. Manga is serial graphic novel format. They're like magazines. They come out like 2, 3, 4, sometimes 6 times a year with a new edition, and the story just goes on and on and on. And boys love series. Why? What's the worst 10 pages of any book? The first 10 pages. You got to figure out the setting and the characters and the language and all that baloney. With a series, you figure it out once, and you never have to do it again. And it's one of the reasons they just love manga. This is just comic book, page after page after page, about 160 pages to each one of these things. And they read these things. Once they get hooked on these they read them by the dozens. We, as adults, don't tend to like them because manga has a reputation. Much like when you say that about a person, I'm talking about exactly the same kind of thing. It tends to be edgy, a little violent, a little sexist maybe. It's the kind of things that we wish that they would not want. But you know what? It's part of the format, and it's never nearly as bad as you heard it was. I read this stuff all the time. I read the edgiest stuff I can find. And you know what? They'll see worse than that at 8 o'clock at night on television. Don't worry about it. Read it with them. As hard as that may seem sometimes, they might really enjoy it. Give them that visual content. All right. Humor. Boys love humor. Why? Because reading and stress go together in their lives. If you can make reading and fun go together, they're going to be pretty happy. And I got to tell you about a book. You can't buy it, but you can order it now. It doesn't come out till September 15th. Escapade Johnson and the Mayhem at Mount Moosilauke. Is that not a great cover? It's my book. I wrote it. Comes out in September. You can order it on Amazon now. It's on my website, too. But you know what? This is not going to win a lot of awards. I know that ahead of time. As the author, I can honestly say this is not currently under consideration for a Newbery Award. That's probably a good thing. Any self-respecting 11-year-old boy knows that a gold seal in the front of a book is pure death. Avoid it at all cost. Other humor you might want to pick up, of course, you saw the Time Warp Trio. John Sheska. John Sheska is the king, the captain of the Boys Read movement. He's traveling around the country. His series, the Time Warp Trio, is all lighthearted, fun, serial fiction. Your mama was a Neanderthal. The good, the bad, and the goofy. Hey, kid, you want to buy a bridge? It's all Greek to me. You can tell where this is going, right? This is just fun, light reading. Science fiction and fantasy, always. The kids that don't read well, the thing that turns them around, yeah. No, let them go. I like that. Have you read Jonathan Stroud? Bartimaeus trilogy, best fantasy out. Have you read Aragon? If you liked Aragon, Jonathan Stroud is your next book. The Bartimaeus trilogy. This is not... Who here thinks Harry Potter is good fantasy? Yeah, let me dissuade you just a little bit here. Harry Potter isn't fantasy. It's a good book. It has appeal to a lot of things. It has fantasy elements in it. It is not fantasy. If you got a boy that's just not going to read anything at all except hardcore fantasy, Harry Potter is going to do it for him, right? If he likes Harry Potter, on the other hand, you might want to give him some real fantasy and see if he likes it. If he likes Harry Potter, you give him Aragon. He likes Aragon. You've got it made now. Jonathan Stroud's the next one you give, the Bartimaeus trilogy. This is dark stuff, right? This is worlds clashing, political intrigue, assassination. One of the genies in this gets called by a magician, and the magician didn't do the calling right, didn't do the summoning right, so the genie just eats him. This is dark stuff. This is real hardcore fantasy, but it focuses on things like the heroic quest and the search for honor and fighting for what you believe in and all those things that just speak to guys. Aragon is a book that's changed so many kids' lives. Why? The kid who wrote it was 19 years old, and he wrote a real, serious, great fantasy book. If it weren't for this trilogy, I'd be standing up here saying Aragon is the greatest fantasy out now. But if they're going to read Tolkien someday, and Tolkien's what turned me around, that's the one to read to warm up. Another great series, if you haven't seen it, Tales of the Atori. This is fantasy, a fantasy realm based in feudal Japan. So you've got, the sort of dark wizards working behind the scenes with mysterious powers, and they're pulling all the political strings, and they're starting wars, and they're ending wars, and they're making careers. It's all that great fantasy stuff set in feudal Japan. Somebody gets their head cut off with a sword in one clean swipe in the first chapter of the first book, and they're hooked from that point on, I guarantee you. You know what's even better about this series? The format. It comes in two formats. It comes in a regular format. Forget it. Don't buy it. Get this format. The little one. Why? Because so many times a boy gets assigned to go read a book 200 pages long. And 200 pages is just too much to read in 2 weeks. Guess what? That's 200 pages long. They may be small pages, but it's 200 pages long. They're just going to love it. Fits in their back pocket. It's a great format. Really great reader. And there's 6 of them out now. So once they get started, they got plenty to read. Sports. Matt Christopher, right? Wrong. Come on, people. Matt Christopher is the sports writer we all grew up thinking about. And if you're a teacher or librarian, you were told in library school or in education school, Matt Christopher, there's your sports writer, a good writer for boys. I get boys coming to me all the time and say, do you think he actually played football? No. Pretty clear Matt Christopher never played football. They're not, the sports in it isn't great. You want great sports? Mike Lupica. He's on the sports reporters, right? He's the guy that everyone knows. He's been writing sports in New York for 20 years. He is a great sports. All the sports in this are great. The best sports book out in the last year, it's on your list there. I think I have it with me. Wrestling book, Pinned by Alfred Martino. I was a high school wrestler. I can't believe anyone had the guts to actually write about what we went through. It was almost a secret pact among high school wrestlers that you never told anyone what really went on. If you've seen the stories about all those terrible things that high school girls do to their bodies, you have no idea. You got to read this book. This book is brutally honest. Great sports action about what wrestlers do. 8 hours of workouts followed by wrapping your body up in cellophane and putting on 3 sets of sweats and going down into the boiler room and doing push-ups for 2 hours because you got to lose another half a pound to make weight. Not eating for 4 months, measuring out the water you drink in drops. It's amazing stuff. You won't believe your eyes, but I can tell you every word of it's true. And it's good, hard-nosed sports boys will appreciate. Outdoor adventure, right? Gary Paulson, right? Wrong. Hey, you're getting it. It's only taking me an hour and a half here. Gary Paulson actually is a fantastic writer. He's a good writer for boys. He's the kind of writer that a lot of boys will react well to. He's the kind of writer that a lot of adults kind of like. He's right down the middle, right where you want it to be, unless it doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, you want a real outdoor adventure writer, Ben Michelson. Touching Spirit Bear. Yeah. Rescue Josh McGuire is his other one. A Boy and His Bear Cub. What more could you ask for, right? These are great outdoor adventure books. We don't tend to think much of outdoor adventure books or sports books just because they're so physical, right? This is reading. We want boys to use their minds. Understand, boys are physical creatures. They're going to want to be physical, and they're going to want to read about things that are physical. It actually has a draw to them. Let them read them. They're going to find a lot of value in there. This one's a little harder, but hold on to your hats. Gothic horror. We all remember R.L. Stine, right? R.L. Stine was a horror writer, right? Wrong. If you thought R.L. Stine was bad, wait till you meet Darren Shan. The Cirque du Freak. You can tell where that goes from there. It's actually a series called The Vampire's Assistant, and it is the dark world of vampires and monsters and half-snakes and all that stuff. And it's creepy and crawly, and there are spiders that, form spider webs over people's heads. It's just all kinds of really cool, gross, creepy stuff. This is what boys who want to be reading Stephen King when they're 10 years old, this is what they should be reading. And yes, I did say that, 10 years old. This is the biggest appeal in my town in 4th grade. One of my 4th grade boys found out about this book and went nuts, and suddenly every boy in town wanted to read this book. We have it in our teen section because, frankly, I'm not gutsy enough to put it where it belongs. All my 4th graders are sneaking up into the teen section. They're grabbing the book. They're bringing it down into the children's room and trying to check it out down there. Like, we care who checks this thing out. He's a fantastic writer, though. If you liked early Stephen King, if you understood that Stephen King really knew how to write back before his accident, this will remind you of Stephen King. It's fantastic stuff. Understand you're going to be uncomfortable with it. It may not appeal to you. It may gross you out. You're not the target audience. Understand it's going to appeal to them and give it to them. All right, time to wrap it up, and I'm going to wrap it up with a little explanation here. If you've been in school for, a week, you know how this works, right? The teacher hands you a book. You flip it open to page 1, and on page 1 you meet a boy and his dog. What's going to happen? The dog doesn't stand a chance. Yeah, very good. Yeah, the dog's gonna die. It's the setup. It's just the way it really is. Gordon Corman is probably the most boy-friendly writer on the face of the earth. He wrote his first book when he was 12. It was published by Scholastic when he was 14. He's been writing ever since, and he never grew out of being 12. That's why he's such a great writer. he was speaking at a conference for boys, and what generally happens, I get called into these, if it's an all-day conference, I do the first 2 hours, I do all the bad news, all the boring stuff, and they bring in some big-time author to come in with the good news and excite everybody. Well, I was in Connecticut, I go up, do my 2 hours, Gordon Corman stands up after me. And he says, all right, all of you, you know this deal with the dog dying. I want you to consider how many books are on the Newbery list, that great list of all the best books for kids. How many books on the Newbery list have this very thin plot element where the dog dies compared to how many truly funny books there are? And 300 librarians stared at the ceiling, and you could see their lips moving as they went through. Sounder and Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows is a double. 2 dogs buy it in that one. So he wrote the book, No More Dead Dogs, about one of these dead dog books. And everyone got a good chuckle out of this, and then he sat down. The next person up was a woman named Kathleen O'Dean. And if you're a librarian, you know who Kathleen O'Dean is. In fact, most of you probably know her anyways, even if you don't recognize the name. Best books for boys, best books for girls, best books for horse lovers, best books for kids that are going to grow up to be astronauts, best books for people who don't like asparagus. If it's a bibliography for kids, she wrote it. She's the best bibliographer of our day for kids. And because of that, she is a stalwart on the committee that chooses the Newbery Award books. And she was there in the audience listening to this. And I got to be standing there after the conference when the two of them squared off. And you got to understand, they're good friends. These are 2 of the titans in publishing, 2 of the biggest names in kids publishing in America. And here they are. They're good friends, and they're laughing and they're joking. But you know what Kathleen O'Dean said? You got to stop telling that joke. The Newbery Award is not a popularity contest. It's a contest for what is the best book for kids of the year. And Gordon Corman stared right back at her and said, are you telling me funny books can't be good books? And she said, that's not what I said. And physically took 2 steps backwards to separate herself from this. But it doesn't matter what we say. It's what the kids hear. And they get this. They look at that Newbery list, and you know what? There isn't a single funny book on it. There are books with some humor in it, but there are no books that are primarily humor on that list. And there are easily 6 dead dog books. I can't always come up with them because I never read them in school. I refused. I could tell where they were coming from all the time. We put these best book lists together. We put summer reading lists together. And we give kids the best books, right? We choose the books. We want kids to have the best. We want them to have the books that are going to change their lives. So what do? We put these lists together. Librarians put these displays together. Families, we put these home libraries together with the books that made a difference in our lives, the books that affected us. And you know what we forget so often? Most of us are women. Most educators, most librarians are women. We're doing the books that spoke to us, and we're not realizing that they just may not necessarily speak to all of our audience, and we need to turn our head around. If you're hearing from me today that you should let boys read anything they want, no matter how bad it is, you missed the boat. It went right by you. Let me catch it back up. I'm not saying let him read anything, no matter how bad it is. And if you ever say that, by the way, in front of a kid, you've lost them. Absolutely. They'll never listen to you again because you just reaffirmed what I like to read isn't real reading. What I'm saying is that the reading that boys value has value simply because they value it. You don't have to get it. You're not the intended audience. You absolutely have to see that if the book speaks to them, there's something in that book that has value. Your job is to go find it. And that's the way you're going to connect your boy with reading. I know that's hard. I know the thinking. And I know it basically comes down to we care too much. Right? We care so much. We know boys don't read as well or as much as girls. We know that boy is not likely to take advice from us very often. If we get one chance, if he's standing in front of us, and we've got one chance to promote a book to him, and he's going to read one book this year, you know what? We're determined that that book is not going to be Captain Underpants, right? But here's the deal, folks. If he reads Captain Underpants, he just might read 2 books this year. And for most boys, that's a victory. I wish you lots of victories. I'll be around to answer questions afterwards. Thank you very much.